What's up? Do you ever feel like nothing makes sense? Like, you think you can grasp the meaning of something and it slips away? Well, today you're in luck. We're going to talk about Camus and the absurd life. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Danny with my buddy Randy. What's up?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so I was thinking about Camus recently, and he says that basically that, you know, as human beings, we really want meaning and purpose. We really want to know why we're here, what we're doing, why we're doing it. But he says, the absurd problem is that we ask the universe and it's always silent. And so there is no answer. Essentially, he thinks everything is fundamentally meaningless. And we have to create meaning. But the problem is that, most of the time we just accept meanings that are already there from society, from others, whatever, because it's easier. But then we run into these problems where, I think there's one of the issues of like the existential crisis, right? Where you run into these moments where you have a crisis of meaning because all of a sudden you realize that maybe those things that you thought were true are not true anymore or could be challenged, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because you know, when you look back on life, it tends to make sense. But when you're in the moment, looking forward or just looking at things as they are right now,
Yeah.
it's crazy, it's absurd, it's meaningless. It doesn't make sense at all. But it's like maybe that's the fabric of reality, the nature of life, is just that in the moment there isn't anything, but it's just the only time that does make sense that we can actually have meaning or have it be not absurd is when looking backwards at it.
That's one possibility, right? In the story we tell ourselves about our lives and how they are and like why we are the way we are and stuff. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
interesting because like I was thinking about it a lot too because like, it's like well, a lot of existentialists think, right? Like it's so much easier to go through life accepting meanings that have been made for us, Like whether it's like religion, culture, community, whatever, like right and wrong, good and bad, overall like higher values
Yeah,
and like,
because not only does it make things easier, but it also connects you with other people. It like makes you part of a community.
well, that's just it, right? Like it's easy. You don't have to think about it. You get validation because other people believe the same thing. But the problem with that is that so often, when we do that, we end up not living our own life and making choices for ourselves because we're living a life that's like confined by these rules and meanings that somebody else created that aren't really right for us. And so this is why I think so many people do struggle with meaning later in life when they start
Mm.
really thinking for themselves or start questioning things. He actually
And
he
that's
has
when
a
they have a midlife crisis.
well, exactly, right? Yeah. He says at one point too, like as soon as you start thinking, right, you undermine things. Because as soon as we start thinking about stuff and really thinking about like our values, I mean, if you think about it, right? If you really think about your values and stuff, you start to realize that they're all made up. None of them are
Yeah.
like have any foundation in anything secure. There's no like authority to tell us, So I think it makes it really hard to kind of figure out what we're supposed to do, I guess, in the world.
Well, I mean, you nailed the problem on the head right there, thinking. It was in the Tao Te Ching we were just reading where it's
Yeah.
like, stop thinking and end your problems. It's just like, you couldn't say it any clearer than that.
But
Like
isn't that the
all,
funny thing about being human though, right? Like that's part of the absurdity of our condition is that, if we just stop thinking, things are way easier.
well,
But we
okay, so
can't help it.
here's another thing that I think about all the time. Like, you know how you see people do stuff and you're like, what is that person thinking? Like, are they a freaking moron? Something like that. Well, like we think that animals and everything can't think, but we also think that other people can't or don't think. So like what if animals and trees and rocks and all this stuff does actually think? We just think that we're better than them and we have this ability and we have this burden that they don't have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think animals do think though, like a lot of them, especially when you talk about like the really intelligent ones, like elephants, the great apes,
Yeah,
it's
all the
just
ones that
not,
masturbate, like the
yeah,
dolphins and the monkeys, they
exactly.
definitely
They know what's
think.
going on. No, but they're like, I think it's just probably not, well, I don't know. Some of them are very smart, but probably not as complex. Like it's a gradation, right? Like
Hmm.
a matter of degree, probably. Because I'm sure they do. I mean, I can't even see my dog thinking sometimes. You can see like the thoughts. They might not be big thoughts, but they're definitely thoughts. But yeah, it's funny,
So,
and I think that's why we sometimes like look at animals and stuff as having like it's so easy because they don't have to worry about anything. Because that's the other problem. Once you start thinking, you start seeing that you're responsible for how you see the world too, and that responsibility and that weight weighs on you. I think it's really challenging, and I think one of the dangers is we go back to sort of the old way of thought that where everything was secure and comfortable, but that's never going to work for us again either once we have that sort of moment of realization. And yeah, it's a challenge.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah. So,
it's well, sorry, hold on. It's like Aristotle said this too when he was talking about happiness, he's like he thought that there had happiness had to be the final or eudaimonia had to be like the highest good. Because essentially, otherwise, if you think about all life is other than that, if we don't have some highest purpose that we're aiming at, life is literally just a series of arbitrary purposes that we set ourselves. That as soon as you achieve one, you have to set a new purpose because that's the meaning you're creating for your life. So it's totally arbitrary. And it
mm,
basically just, that sequence ends when you die.
yeah,
But there's no larger goal, there's no larger organization. It's just these endless pursuit of like goals
of
essentially
having it.
to try and
Well,
give ourselves
but
purpose.
see, I mean, I guess when he says eudaimonia, he talks about something different than like this concept of happiness that we have, because
Yeah.
it seems like the biggest impediment to our happiness is trying to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty
You know, like
much.
and it is. I mean, not only that, but it's also one of those things where like the quickest way to make someone unhappy is to ask them if they are happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, that's the thinking
yeah,
about it, right? Because then you start thinking about it. And then once
yeah.
you start thinking about it, you have all these possibilities because nothing's set in stone.
I used to hate when my mom would ask me that. She'd be like, "Are you happy?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I was until you made me think about it."
Yeah, I was daydreaming. I was fine.
Like,
Thank you.
yeah, I was fine.
Thanks for ruining that.
Yep.
Jeez. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting because then, like, I mean, because I always found Camus' philosophy fascinating because, for him, it's like, you know, yes, we can create meaning, obviously, but that's mostly looking back, like you were saying. It's like looking back and reinterpreting our life, so understanding ourselves now, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it's also interesting because he says we should stay like aware of the absurd. So really like what ends up happening is like if you can stay accepting the absurd or the absurdity of life, that there's no meaning, you can create meaning, but it's always like kind of plastic. You're always aware that it could be changed at any moment, right? Because nothing's fixed or guaranteed or objective. And basically, like, all experiences become fundamentally equivalent. Like that good and bad experiences because you're beyond good and evil, right? Those are
Hmm.
valuations. So it's more
Mm.
about having experiences aware of the absurdity of life, not necessarily weighing them one way or the other. Does that make
Well,
sense?
that
Yeah.
sounds very much like a Buddhist type of
Yeah.
way of
Oh
looking
yeah.
at it. Like it's about not clinging, you
Yep.
know? You have the good things and sure they're great, and you have the bad things and sure they're terrible, but the challenge comes when you cling to them. And so the Buddha taught not clinging.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved that. There's tons of overlap between like Taoism, Buddhism, the existentialists and stuff. Really, I mean, awful.
Hmm.
It's the same problem they're working on, you know?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
the problem of life.
Yeah, and living. But it's,
Hmm.
and living, life's hard
Well,
and
you
there's
know what?
suffering and stuff. I think that's why we want to give ourselves these like
See,
defined ideas.
here is the problem. Okay? We have these snake oil salesmen nowadays selling meditation, Buddhism, spirituality as basically the problem, the thing that solves your life's problems. Like
Yeah.
you have this experience right now where your life sucks, and if you were only enlightened, like Eckhart Tolle or somebody else,
You would feel
then all of
better.
your problems would go away. But that's not true.
Nope.
Like, you know, uh, somebody once said, what happens after enlightenment? And another 10,000 hours on the cushion. You
Yeah.
just same thing, more problems, but there is a bit of a difference afterwards where afterwards when you're chopping wood, you're just chopping wood. When you're eating, you're just
Yeah.
eating.
But
But
well, no, but it's similar to like, I mean, that's similar to what like, I mean, the ancient Greeks talked about, when they're talking about the good life, right? Is that it's not like you achieve this thing where like all of a sudden you're wise and you're done. It's
mhm,
continual effort and work, but that continual effort and work has a payoff where you're more balanced and harmonious internally. so you can deal with the ups and downs and the struggles in life way better than you would otherwise be able to. And that's sort of
Hmm.
the goal. It's funny. I was actually talking to my class this last week, and I was saying, it's one of the things that kills me with how we think about morality now, I think, is like I feel like so many people view morality as like it's about judging other people. And I was like, but if you look at all these like philosophers and ancient thinkers and wisdom and stuff, none of them were concerned with judging other people. It was about you and you becoming better. And then, obviously, if everybody worked on themselves, so yeah, the world would be better. That's true. But it was never really about like, oh, I need to figure this out so I can judge people or, show them how much better I am than they are at virtue or whatever the
Hmm.
hell. I feel like
Yeah,
so
well,
much
that's
of it's become like this signaling BS and like
oh,
nonsense.
totally the woke culture where I'm more woke than you are. It's just yeah, it's another competition. Yeah, but huh, interesting. So I mean, life is absurd. There are ups and there are downs.
But I think the benefit is, right, is that if we realize this is the benefit too of it, is I think when you start to think and you realize that there is no absolute meanings, right? I think it also makes you way, one, more open-minded, and two, better able to sort of deal with all the ridiculous crap that seems to happen in the world today, especially with media and stuff and like everybody yelling at you and all that nonsense. Like I think it does make you better equipped to sort of see that stuff for what it is, as for, one person's perspective, people trying to gain power, whatever, all these things, and kind of also laugh at us a little bit at the human condition.
Oh, dude, 100% laugh at us. Because, like the Tao Te Ching talks all the time about how, like, if we knew where we actually came from, we wouldn't worry about all this stuff because we all just are from the same thing. We're all just going back to the
Yeah,
same thing. But it's like crazy because in the midst of it, it seems like there's a millions or billions, I don't know how many people there are now, but lots of other people.
tons of people. There's
And
tons of
yeah, and
people.
and and none of them are the same.
Yeah.
But really it's just this thing that's just we going back to where it was.
Well, it's like you were saying earlier too about how like we don't necessarily realize that other people have like a unique inner life, you know? Yeah, and I think it's funny
Yeah.
because which is why like, you see somebody do something stupid, you're like, oh, they're such an idiot. When, they might have just
Yeah.
been distracted or had a bad day or been tired or whatever. Because it's the same sort of the same justifications you would use on yourself, right? But we just
Right.
don't see other people. We don't realize they have that internal life most of the time. They're just like side
Or
characters.
or like point in case how we torture people. Like
Oh God,
the
yeah,
I'm
right?
reading those John Abercrombie books and they're really, really good, but there's one character in them who basically like tortures people for his job. He's like a religious
Insane
inquisitor or
job,
something
right?
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, right? And he like tortures people. And it's crazy because like as you're reading this, you're like imagining what that would actually be like. Like they have his hand held down, they're just like chopping off his fingers a little bit at a time. And you're just like, how can you do that to somebody else? But
For
you can
God.
do that to somebody else if you don't realize that they actually have like an
Yeah.
internal world.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, that's just it though, right? Like if we were aware of that, we would treat people so much differently. Because there's no way we would be, and I think that's the other thing, like a lot of stuff like that, like torture or even like most violence requires viewing the other person as not a person.
Hmm.
Because if you really thought of them as a person, there's no way you'd be able to do that because there would be empathy. And
Hmm.
and like, yeah, dude, the torture
Or
they
maybe
thought
or
of
maybe
back in the
viewing it
day
as a
was just,
person like you.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly, right?
Because
Like,
we see them as person, but they're the other, you
yeah,
know.
well, yeah, exactly, right? Like equivalent to you in some way or equal to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's insane. The shit they thought of though back in the day for torture was just nuts.
I mean, I'm on the third book now. I want to go back and reread the first book because I remember the first book was like crazy. They were like peeling the skin off of people and everything like that,
Yeah,
and it's just like,
horrible.
dude, it's freaking
They
nuts.
used to flay people alive. That is horrible. I mean, I hope to God for those people that they blacked out really fast. But
Actually, interestingly enough, there's a possibility that they might have. So I was reading this book on Unleash, I think it's called like Unleash the Tiger or something like that, about like kind of undoing trauma and stuff like that. And he was talking about how like the predator-prey relationship when whatever animal chases down a gazelle, I guess that's Lion, tiger,
Lion?
I don't know,
I think
whatever.
lions chase gazelles,
Yeah, something like
probably.
that. Whatever animal chases down a gazelle. Like as soon the moment it actually catches the gazelle, before it kills it or anything, the gazelle just goes limp. And it's actually like it's the physiological response that prevents the gazelle from actually feeling any pain.
Oh, it's
And
like this
so
is over, shut down.
yeah, so like maybe that same type of thing happens in those type of
Oh, you know
probably.
what? That's kind of interesting because that's like I know rabbits can literally give themselves a heart attack from fear,
Hmm.
right? And they like,
Yeah.
and if you ever watch, like they'll like at one some point, like when the hawk is chased, they'll like freeze and like their eyes go
Yeah.
like, and it's like they're
Yep.
gone. Yeah,
Yeah. Dude,
that
they
makes
can break
sense.
their own back too.
Wow.
Rabbits, if you don't hold them right, they'll kick and they'll just break their own back. They are a crazy animal.
Yeah, they are. God, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not the brightest
But
bulb in
like
that
that,
batch
I
either.
mean, I mean, reading that part of the book kind of made me see like how the relationships we are in kind of form themselves. Like we talk, people are always talking about codependent relationships, but it's not like one person did wrong. It's like the two people interacting actually forms it and makes it stronger, and then it just like forms this cycle where like you have this predator prey type of
Self-reinforcing.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Well, it's also crazy too because it's like this is the other thing I think that's interesting. It's like, and this is what Camus was actually partially concerned with because he was writing right during and after World War II, right? And the German occupation in France. So he was
Hmm.
thinking about like how do people do these things to other people, right? And I think this is the other thing that we have to keep in mind is like, how do our beliefs cause us to interact with the world? And are they causing us to interact with the world in a negative or positive way? Right? Are they causing us to, and I think this is one of the dangers too of not thinking and not being more open-minded and not kind of reflecting on life is that we can easily become part of these groups that are extreme or do things to others or like, have all these justifications that don't actually mean anything or make any sense, but like we think they're absolutely true because we're sort of blocking ourselves off and like only seeing with tunnel vision.
Dude, it's crazy how much even a difference a day can make. Like sometimes we talk about
Yeah.
this, how like getting towards nighttime, our perception of
Oh, dude,
reality is kind of off, and then we'll get a good night's sleep, and the next morning we're like, "Whoa, how did I even think that
dude.
last night?"
As soon as I get tired, I'm like the biggest bitch, and I just think is gonna work out ever. I get so miserable when I'm sleepy. If I try to stay awake, it's or hungry.
Yeah.
Those two
Yep.
things make me feel like I'm like I should just end it. This is
Yep.
terrible. Nothing's ever gonna get better.
Forget it.
Then I have a snack. I'm like, oh wait, never mind.
Yeah.
I need to
Just
eat.
have a snack, go to bed,
I
and it's great in the morning.
know. We're just
Yeah.
animals.
Hmm. Seriously.
But yeah, I was just thinking about that a lot this week. I was thinking like, it's funny because like we read all this stuff. I think just people, it's a shame people don't think more about life because this is all we have is this life. And I think if you think about it, you can take ownership of it and it can be, you can find, I think, some peace and like some happiness no matter what your circumstances are. I think it's
Hmm.
possible. But we get so caught up in like all these things that don't matter really in the grand scheme of things.
Hmm.
And all this attempts to validate ourselves in the world that don't matter in the grand scheme of things,
Hmm.
it's like, and I think that causes us to be really distracted from maybe what's important, which is just trying to live better, now.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, there you have it. Life is absurd. If you like this episode, check us out on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. If you have any ideas for episodes, feel free to reach out. Our emails, you can comment on YouTube videos, send us an email, emails and show notes. We'll be back later this week with another episode, though. Until then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.